Happy Friday, guys, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Dubs. I'm your host, Bill T. Well, it's Friday, and I'm back with another podcast. Sorry I missed one last week, guys. I was out of town, had some stuff going on. Been working on a couple big podcasts, putting together, doing some editing and things like that. Just didn't have one to get out to you, and in the past, we've had some issues with, I'm the editor, I'm the producer, I'm everything we got. So didn't want to rush it out for you guys. So this week, I've got a podcast for you. Transaxles. We all need transaxles. It's the necessary means for our Volkswagen to get down the road. And I've got Ben Berniklau with BENCO Trans-axels on the podcast today. Now, I first heard of Ben when I saw his ad on the Samba. And I think I saw an ad in the magazine where he said lifetime gear changes. Whatever gear change you want, if you want a different gear change, he will change the gear for you for life on the transaxle. So I thought it was pretty interesting. Mentioned it once before on the podcast, and I ran into him at Kelly Park, and so hit him up and said, hey, let's do a podcast. I like to hear about tranny building, all that fun stuff, and really get your story to see, seem like a young kid, but he's got a long history in building transaxles. His dad at one point was part owner of one of the biggest tranny companies in Southern California. So he grew up around transaxles in the Volkswagen scene, and he's still in it today, and it's what he loves to do. So it's a great podcast. So to support our podcast, don't forget, go to letstalkdubs.com, pick up some merch if you want to support the podcast. It's also not too early to get registered and book your room for one crazy weekend. That's coming up October 3rd through the 5th at the Orleans Hotel and Casino. Go to letstalkdubs.com and click on the showtime or the flyer on the link on the main page to get more information. Also, VW Trends Magazine, a magazine for the people, by the people. Go subscribe today. We saw Dan We're up there in San Jose at Kelly Park Show. Kicked it with him for a little bit. So he's out there doing what he does. And also Ross Wolf. High quality aftermarket parts by VW enthusiasts for VW enthusiasts. So go check him out today at Ross Wolf with a U, rosswolf.com. Now, I'm ready to get this podcast to you guys. It's been a crazy couple weeks around here, but I'm glad to be back putting one out for you. So check it out. Tranny talk, lots of good information on here. So make sure when we get deep in that tranny on the back end of this thing, make sure you guys get your notepad out because there's a lot of little details that you can have that might save some of your headaches and heartaches. So let's talk transaxles this week. BENCO VW Trans-axels with Ben Berniklau on Let's Talk Dubs.
You probably don't know that there's a new Volkswagen out that doesn't look like a Volkswagen. It's got everything that people who like the bug like.
Okay, everybody. So on today's show, transaxles are something that every one of us has in our cars and we need. And the world of tranny builders is getting smaller. And it seems like we're always struggling to find the right tranny builder. And one of the things that was interesting is recently, it's got to be a few years back, as I was going through the Samba, one of the magazines, I saw an advertisement for BENCO VW Trans-axels, and they were offering lifetime gear change as long as you own the car, change your gears, whatever. If you decided to go from drag racing to street racing, whatever, and you wanted to change your gear sets. And so it intrigued me, and I ran into Ben when I was up at Kelly Park, and I decided let's get him on the podcast because I don't think I've had any tranny guys on the podcast as of yet. So on today's show, I'd like to welcome Ben Berniklau from BENCO VW Trans-axels out of Riverside, California. Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, so we talked a little bit at the show up there. I talked to you about coming on the podcast, and the way that we always start the podcast is, what's your VW story, and how did you get into Volkswagens?
All right, so I'm second generation into this whole deal. My father, he fed the family with it. Now I'm feeding my family with it also. This is all I've ever done. Parentheses, never had a real job. You know what I mean? This is never been white collar. This is what I've done. the last 10 years, 12 years, I've done it on my own. Well, a little bit before that, you know, on the side type deal too. But so yeah, my father was into it, more than into it, and you know, he tells all the used to tell all the stories about driving the you know, when I forget what one of his birthdays, 16th or 18th birthday, and driving up to the Real MP in Riverside and buying a camber compensator with my grandpa, you know, his father, and you know, that was a big old thing. So how he got stuck on it, God knows. The man was 6'7". He shouldn't have been driving Volkswagens anyway, but
yeah,
it is what it is.
Well, and so with your dad being the VW world in the building transaxles and stuff like that, so you naturally you're there with your dad, you start working with him and stuff like that. I mean, how old are you when you first start working at the shop?
So that was the thing. So he never wanted me to do this. It was always, you know, I don't want you to do that. Go get a real job. Go, you know, don't work dirty. Don't work with your hands. Work clean. Work in an office. You know, get air conditioning, that type of stuff. And it's just in my lineage, right? I'm good with my hands. That's what I'm good at. I can do things with my hands. I'm tactile. Even my son, my little boy, is 8, and you can already see it. He's better with his hands than he is with schoolwork. It is what it is. So he never really taught me any of the stuff. I remember, I came home one day when I was, I don't know, 16 or 17 with this buggy, this piece of crap I got out of some guy's yard for $100, water pipe buggy, and the thing didn't run, and I'm trying to get it running, and you know, he's not going to help me. You know what I mean? It's
yeah.
Well, how do I check for spark, or what? Well, how do I run the valves? Or, you know, he's not going to help me. You know what I mean? So it was just one of those things. He never wanted me to do it. So all this little bit of stuff that I got into doing, I kind of had to, you know, do it myself. You know, it took me until I was probably 23 or 24 before he'd finally tune a set of carburetors for me, you know, before I figured out how to do that myself. You know, I finally got a set of these 48s, or I'm sorry, 48s that were boarded 51s. I got on this, built my first drag car. I'm all proud of this thing, and built my first hot rod motor and all this stuff. You know, my really first drag race motor, high compression deal. And he finally would set the mixture screws for me and set the linkage for me. So stuff like that. You know, it's kind of funny because he didn't see where I made it. You know what I mean? He never saw how good I got with this stuff. So it's just interesting how it all works out.
And sometimes what happens is, if it's like what Dad does, sometimes, and you're around it all the time growing up, you naturally started falling in love with Volkswagens and the Volkswagen hobby and all that stuff. It was just kind of felt like home to you, or what was it that drew you to that? Right.
So I didn't know anything else. So he campaigned a dragster in the 80s, mid to late 80s, Volkswagen power turbo dragster, and it had a standout box with a live axle, swing axle in it. So he still shifted it. It didn't have a power glide in it. So, you know, the thing ran, I think he said it ran 807 at 170 something.
Oh, wow.
Turbo Volkswagen with a carburetor with, you know, this was before nobody was really running MSD, you know, and you had to leave it on the whip, you know, it wasn't no launch control, none of that crapola. So when we went racing a lot, that was when the stands were full when you went to the Volkswagen races, and it was just a big thing. And I went to all those, and I had a little pit bike, bicycle with all the stickers on it that would stay in the trailer, and I just rolled around all the time. You know, dropped names like crazy, like Lloyd Mosier. Me and his son, we'd play a lot at the track, you know, and that's just because they went to all those same races. So it was just funny stuff. So that was always part of it. Later in life, he kind of got burned out on it, so we didn't have much for Volkswagens for a while. And then when I got in high school, I got back into it and built a drag car again. And then we were on our way to doing a 65 bug. We did the powder coat of the pan and did all that crap, and never got it painted and gave up on it. But so he started getting back into it as he saw I was getting more into it.
And how old are you? How old are you at this time that you start getting into it? Like you start looking for a Volkswagen for a car.
Yeah, so it's probably when I got my first job. I got my first job working for ERCO in Riverside, and And then, then it's like you're standing around it, and Steve Tins is coming in and Greg Tins is coming in, and Greg had some hot street car at the time that was the fastest thing, and he still could drive it around. And I think it was, man, I don't even remember. I think it was like Volksworld or something. Was that an old magazine at that time?
Uh-huh.
There was a magazine came out and had some orange early car with 5 spokes, and I was like, I'm going to build one of those, right? So that was the whole hot thing, and I do things different than my father. He was like, oh, yeah, we got to get the perfect body so we can get it perfectly painted. I'm like, no, man, I want to buy one that's got windows in it so I don't have to put the windows back in.
Right.
You know what I mean? So he got me, this car's never been hit, but some other guy took it apart and lawful. When somebody takes the doors apart, that sucks. I don't care how good you are. That takes forever to fix, to put all back together, right? To get them working nicely again. They never work as good as a factory. So anyway, I wanted a car that I could kind of get running, maybe a little bit uglier, and he wanted, me to be driving some show car, and that's probably why I never got finished. I was sitting there waiting to get painted, and it just never did.
And now, so you said your dad was a transaxle builder, and didn't want you to get in the business, but you end up working for ERCO. Now, for those that don't know what ERCO is, what shop is ERCO?
So he started doing engines and transaxles, so he did all that stuff.
So they rebuilt stuff?
Yeah, for forever. And then he would always tell stories of back in the 70s, he told me he could drive a bug in, do the motor and the trans, and drive it out at night when he was busting butt when he was 20-something. I don't know how true that was, but it sure sounded good when you heard the story.
And then,
But ERCO he was a transaxle parts supplier here locally, kind of before Weddell took over, real big. He was kind of the guy to go to. He made or imported gears. He had made, I'm sure everybody heard of ERCO wheels, the spun aluminum wheels. That was kind of his designs that he had spun locally here. And he was really into the drag racing stuff. So it's hard when you're sitting there and all the 48s. He had a wall of 48s, so it's hard when you're sitting next to that stuff, and it's like, man, I want to do that. I want to build these cars. Oh, it's hard to get that. Well, I can get that. Oh, Type 3 rear brakes. Well, I can do that. I can do that. Oh, drill some drums. Oh, I can do that. You know what I mean? So all that stuff started being available to me with just a little bit of oomph and a little bit of labor. You stay a couple hours a night. He let me use the mills and all that stuff. So I could do all this neat stuff nowadays.
And then, do you remember any particular car that you saw in the magazine? So it was the orange car that you saw with the 5 spokes that kind of lit your fuse? Like, I want to build one of those.
Yeah. And then I was really into Type 3s, wanted a notchback like crazy. So it scored this 64 whatever notchback that had rust holes in it, and I was all proud of that. Drove that thing all around and built the 1835 for it. I was all proud of that. So, it was all ghetto slam and scraping everywhere.
Yeah. And so how long are you with ERCO for?
I worked there, man.
And when you're working there, are you building transaxles or motors?
No, never did the transaxles. Kind of got into motors here a little bit for my buddies, and my dad was doing dune buggy stuff on the side, so every once in a while I'd go and I'd do all the rockers, and I'd do this prep work and that prep work for him when he would slap them all together. So I was always around it. But like I said, I never really had the desire to get into it till that last little bit, and then then it kind of hit me real hard. And I probably worked for ERCO maybe 4 or 5 years, something like that.
And then where do you go after that, and what are you doing?
So during that time, every transaxle guy everybody would buy parts from him, and I would answer the phone or talk to the people coming over the counter. So I got to know everybody, right? You know everybody, know everybody's story, know all the dirt, everything. So there was a guy who started his own transaxle shop at that time, and super friendly, and towards the end of ERCO there, I slid over to him, and that's where I started building the stuff daily, all day long, every day. And that was maybe late '05, '06, because I rolled, probably not that early. I rolled up during the good times, right? Because that was good living. And then in '08, when everything took a dump, then that was the end of it, and then there was no more work. And then then I kind of got booted off of there because it was piecework, right? And well, there ain't no pieces to build, there ain't no work.
Right. And now, at this point, how did you learn to build? Did your dad teach you to build transaxles, or did you have to learn working for somebody else?
So I kind of just fumbled my way through it. I built the first one I remember doing was this guy gave me this piece of crap, the 72 standard bug, and I took the body off and in the trash, and I built just a pan buggy just out of trash for nothing. And I put a bus box in it with a Buzz the Bug kit, and I built that first bus out of just crap that was laying around. And it was a fun car. I jumped that car so far. It was a ball joint IRS car. I jumped it so far it broke in the middle like Herbie. I swear to God, it was all cracked down the tunnel. It was the funniest thing ever.
That's
the
crazy.
Best car ever.
And
a 1600 with Cadrones on it and a tri-mill, and you could drive that thing everywhere. It'd go anywhere in the dirt. You drive it all through Glamis with paddles on. It's the funniest thing.
And it's just a pan.
Just a pan, and it had an old drag car roll cage that bolted in it.
That's funny. And so, so you're working for this other shop during the early 2000s up until the crash. The crash stops, and then so my understanding, talking to people with building transaxles, it's completely different than building engines because everything is just kind of by fit and feel, the way that it goes together. But so you're building transaxles on your own. I mean, you've got to have some kind of clue how they go together, right? Like how the understanding of how they work. You've been around it that long that it's common sense to you how they work.
And selling parts for that long too, you'd learn, don't buy that, or only that guy who, buys that other cheap stuff buys that or uses that, and
Yeah.
So, and then you start to get, I got this guy and he puts that in. Oh, don't do that, Or I just got this one and it came from that guy's shop and this guy didn't use these washers and he's a butcher, and it just round and round it goes. So you pick all this stuff up of what you're supposed to do and not supposed to do. And then working for that shop I was working for that little bit of time, I did it his way. Mm-hmm. And as I started going into my own thing, then I started learning, his way was not the way that I want to do stuff. So that what I was doing for all that time working for someone else is all stuff that, I'm not proud of that stuff that I did back then. I mean, I hate to say it, but the stuff that I can control now, it's the world of difference of product. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so, I want to get into tranny building in a little bit after we get through some of your history, but, and so you work for another shop that's kind of a shop that's not doing things above board, and they're just kind of a get it done shop. And you kind of, during the crash, and I was kind of aimless for a little bit of just kind of crap jobs, whatever I could pick up here or there. And then that's kind of where I learned, hey man, people would pay for side jobs on this deal. So I got a couple little side jobs here or there. It wasn't enough to pay the bills. And then this other Volkswagen shop in Riverside has been around here forever. They do everything. Every single person that's lived around the Inland Empire area, Southern California, Riverside area that is into Volkswagens and does this for any kind of money has worked for this shop at one time. I don't care who you talk to. And it goes back to the 80s. This is a fact. So everyone's had ties with this place. And those guys are whatever. They're good guys. But, they do things. They've been there so long that they do it the same old way, and that's how they do it, right? They don't, even doing business, we don't do anything the right new style way because this has worked for us for 30 years and we're just going to keep doing it. So and you feel like that they're kind of like set in their ways, and if there's some new technology, they're not even going to look at it. They're just going to move on to doing things the way that they've done it. So.
Right. Or, just funny things. I try to think of an example, but there was one time I had made friends I fit in there like a glove. It was crazy. I made friends with all the guys that worked there, and we were the last. At the time, they were open till 6, and then you had to put all the customers' cars in. So the last 20 minutes, you'd go get all the keys, you put all the customers' cars in, rack and stack and pack them, get everything in there so nothing got left out. So we're putting all the cars in. Me and my other buddy that works there, we put all the cars in. We go back inside, and this lady's there, and she's not happy. She's complaining about her window on her Jetta or something, because they worked on late model cars too. The Jetta was. She said that someone took her door panel off when they put the window regulator in and broke all the door panel clips. Okay. And the owner's there, one of the owners, and he's talking to this lady. And then they're not talking nicely, and then the lady's boyfriend comes in, and he's not talking nicely, and then the owner's not talking nicely. I go out and put some more cars in, go roll the door down, come back in, and now they're really not talking nicely, and they're yelling and screaming. And he's saying, get out of my shop. And he's saying, I'm not leaving, and blah, blah, blah. You need to fix this and take care of it and all this stuff. And I'm in the back. Mm-hmm. I'm not up there in the counter. I'm in the back. So there's a wall separating me. And that dude freaking goes, the owner pulls out his freaking pistol. And he says, you get out of my shop right now, or I'm gonna use this thing, yada, yada, whatever it was. Right. And me and my buddy, Dan, that worked there, we clocked out and we left. And wow. He was mad about that. He said, you didn't have my back on that deal. I'm like, no, for a Jetta window. Sorry.
Not dying
that's
for that.
That's all you, bud. Yeah.
So the life and times of working for VW repair shops just kind of, sometimes it gets a little hairball and a little sketchy. So was that your last day working there or what?
No. And then I had worked there just doing all the crap jobs of putting the MP order away and selling parts of the counter and just the miserable stuff, answering the friggin' phone and just whatever. And then they figured out they can make money on me doing gearboxes. So then then they cut out their tranny guy, and then I was doing their gearboxes, and I was doing them the same way that I learned how to do it, and it was working. And then they were buying all the parts and then just paying me the labor, so they were making a fortune on it, because then they cut out all the other guys' labor and all the other guys stacking parts on them and yada yada. Because I said, hey, buy it from here, get this, and we need this, and yada yada. And at this time I already collected all the tools, and I got enough stuff I can do it all. And yeah, so I did that, and then I was doing nights, working nights in my garage, doing the gearboxes. Then I was coming, and then it started being more and more gearboxes, and they came to. Then it was working half days, and I think I was coming in at 9 and leaving at whatever, I don't even remember. It was doing half days, and I'm like, man, I don't want to come in anymore. And that was a big thing, because that was no more paycheck, And this is the first time I'm rolling out into the world all on my own. And you got to make it to eat it. You know what I mean? If you're not hustling, you're not making it. And I don't mean hustle like screw people. I mean hustle like you got to get up, you got to get it done, you got to figure it out. You got to go buy cores at night. You got to do whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, then I did that, and then, then that was a whole funny story where that all ended up. So I did that maybe 4 or 6 months, and then I go, I'm gonna get my own Impy account. So I go and I fill all this stuff out. I'm gonna get my Impy account because everybody, everyone's buying.
At this point, you started your own shop?
No, I'm still in the garage, right?
Okay.
But I had some hookups over at Impy, and they're like, how I can get you in for this much buy-in. Just order the stuff, and we'll slide. And at that time, the dude who was sliding me in he's just trying to get what, I don't know how it is now, but at that time it was they're giving you accounts out. Bam, 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 bam. They're giving it out. They don't care. They're just trying to move the product. They don't care. That was the old guy before the corporate people bought it.
Yeah.
And so I get it. I'm all done. I got everything filled out. I got my first order. It's placed, everything. I got money in my hand. I'm going to go down there. And then the company, the business, the Volkswagen shop that I work for finds out. And one of my good buddies that works over there actually found out, because like a dumbass, I put it on the Facebook before I had it handled. I go, hey, let me know. I got all your stuff. Impy, I'm the new Impy guy in town. Best prices around. Let me know, right? Because at the time I'm thinking that's the easiest way to make money. I'll just sling Impy stuff, easy. And he goes down there the next day, tells the bosses, and they call over there and raise hell because they're Impy dealers, and they're already established and have been buying forever and buy a whole bunch of stuff a week, and they get the kibosh put on me, and oh man, that was bad. And they call me up, what are you doing? Blah blah blah. And we're seeing that you're selling trannies on the side besides what you're doing for us. I go, yeah man, we didn't talk about that. I didn't sign anything for you that you owned me, So it was a bad deal. My good buddy that was there that I'm still friends with today, not the guy that ratted me out, but another guy, he was caught in the middle of that deal. And, oh, man, they're grilling him on it. And because he used to come over and do cores for me, and now he take cores apart. So they knew we were tight. Oh, man, it was bad. And, I mean, I'm going, what? They can't do that. And, oh, yeah, they freaking raised so much hell that they got me blocked. And it took me another solid, 8 years before I could get an MP account after that. Yeah. It was crazy.
And then, so now you leave. Now you have no choice. You've got to leave, and you're working out of your garage.
Right, because they go, yeah, they're all pissed off. It's the same day, and they're like, bring all our parts back. Okay. Load everything up, bring them all the parts back, bring them everything back, and they go back to the same old guy they're using, whatever. And now it's really serious, right? Because now I don't even have, they were, let's say, an account, even though
you have no safety
doing all the, exactly. There's no 2 or 3 or 5 guaranteed a week now. Now I got to go really hustle and figure it out. So that was trying times right then for me. That was build your character moments, big time. And then during all this too, my dad dies. So there's no one to call, right? Your dad dies, right?
Yeah.
And they always say you're not a man until your father dies, whatever. So, but the same thing. I always grab my phone, and he was a texter, and I grab my phone and I'm going to text him how I'm feeling, how this is pissing me off, because we're thinking the same. We're the same. Oh, this is going on, that's going on. And now there's no one to text. There's no one to ask. There's no one to lean on for advice. And people that I thought I could lean on for advice or they're okay, family, friends and stuff. And okay, do this. And you hang up your phone and you're thinking about it and you're like, that's not right. That's not what you would have done. All the stories I know about you and watching you, that's not how you would have built your business. So, oh man, like I said, trying times. And
you really kind of found out who was in your corner.
Yes. And then I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, oh man, what am I going to do? And it was in the middle of the night. One night I woke up to take a piss and it's like, why should I start my own training shop? I could do that. And that's what I did. And I went out and here I am. Bam.
And then that was...
I wish it was that easy.
And that was in 2012 when you started BENCO?
So in 2012, I went down and went to the city, got my license, business license, got my resale number, got all set up, and rented a building, rented a little tiny unit at first, and just started doing it and followed the city and followed the fire department and went through all that crap and the fire extinguishers and the business insurance and trial by fire and everything.
It's interesting. As an employee, you never realize the amount of government involvement as owning a business until you start a business.
That's right. But luckily for me at the time, in 2012, people were still trying to get back on their feet. So right now, well, maybe now, but a couple of years ago, you will go down there and say, hey, I want to rent a unit for automotive. No way. No automotive, no woodworking. And that's a big thing around here. Mm-hmm. Unless you go to these really scuzzy, parks that do automotive with all the dead cars out front. So luckily for me, it was a time where, nobody really fought with me when I tried. They're like, wow, you're starting a business, not closing one. Okay. You know what I mean?
And so you start your own business, and you're a one-man show, and are you still a one-man show, or did you bring on some friends, or what'd you do?
So let's see. At this time, I had always had someone helping me do the course, cleaning the dirty parts, stuff like that. And then I had a bunch of guys working for me at one time. We tried to do service for a while. We were trying to do engines for a while. I had a dyno. You know, I tried doing the whole thing. I tried doing the same Volkswagen do everything shop as I kind of came from, and you know, over the years I've just whittled it down. You know, you build some guy a hot rod motor, and you know, when I build stuff for me, you know, I do it big camp, big compression. You know, I want it to run, right? Well, you can't give the normal guy that because they don't know when to step off of it, or you know, so they're, you know, people are burning stuff up, and it's just crazy, you know, throwing belts and keep driving it, and then they're all pissed off, and so I'm done. I'm not doing motors, not to mention all the bad parts and China flat cams, and
Right.
Oh my God, I mean, brutal. I feel for the engine people, I really do.
Now, you said you did. Now, did you have a drag car for a while that you campaigned?
Yes, so I did. Let's see. I had built a few over the years. I built the funnest one was a 66 bug with all original paint, all patinaed, rusty. It was all steel, and I put a 8694 turbo motor in it with a 4-barrel, and that thing was a lot of fun. That ran good. Had roll up windows and everything. It ran 1013 at 130 something.
Wow.
Was all I could get out of it. Couldn't get a 9 out of it. But like I said, it had steel fenders, it had headlights, taillights. The only thing it didn't have was a deck lid. And I raced it at first with a stock seat too. So I had that car. I scored a chassis car from somebody, but it was like a home built type car.
Yeah.
And it was an oval window chassis car, you know, set about 2 inches off the ground. And I went through a couple different motors on that, and swing axle, and did the swing axle Mendiola and all this stuff. And the shop I worked at, the training shop before, hooked me up on all this stuff because it got traded in. So, you know, thankful for that still. You know, anyway, tried running that car, and it was a handful. That thing went. I think I got that to go 1001, blowing the heads off of it through the lights. You know, because
Turbo.
I don't know anything. Yeah, turbo. I didn't know anything about that at the time, and I had no money. So, you know, they say, oh, you need this big, expensive fuel pump to run that much boost. I'm like, well, I have 2 red pumps. Why don't I just put 2 red pumps on it? Well, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, learned that lesson, and never could afford any good stuff on that. So that car never really ran to its potential. Besides, it was all over the track. I mean, it was you'd put it in third gear, and you gotta. You're jockeying that thing. It's up on the bars, and it's all over the place. So I think that car is still around somewhere too. I'm not sure who has it, but somebody in Vegas I think got it at one time.
Oh, really?
And then when my dad died, I cleaned all his stuff out, and he had a really nice '67 sunroof. I mean, it wasn't all original or anything, but it was a nice all one color, all original-ish interior. Maybe it was switched in the 80s or something, but it all looked original, white interior. It was all had bumpers on it, overriders, and the sunroof still worked. And, you know, had vent wing windows. All the trim was on it, and it had a 1600 in it. And I drove that car around forever. And when I was delivering trannies, I had a little Home Depot trailer, a little like 5x5 single axle Home Depot trailer, and I made a hitch that hooked onto the overrider bumper, and I would deliver trannies with that car.
Oh, really?
Yep. And I drove that car a bunch, and then took it. Yeah.
Well, so now, so you race for a while, and then once you get to start your own business, it's probably a little too expensive to keep racing when you're trying to just make transaxles to kind of feed your family and all that kind of stuff. So,
well, during that time, it was doing a little bit better. So then when I kept that 67 for a few years, And then as the other cars, race cars are just tools, so they get cut up, they get thrown away, no big deal. But this was a street car, so you could do whatever you want with it. And then at that time, got a little bit more money. I could afford a main shaft set. I could afford axles. Scored some really nice 48s. Had accumulated some heads here or there. Learned how to do my own weld mates on the flywheel, so I didn't have to wedge mate stuff. I'm learning all this stuff.
Yeah.
Learning some tricks here and there. What works on the dyno, what works in real life, and so I put a 48 motor in that. It was a 8694 48 motor with CB heads, those wedge ports, and it was the last set of heads that my dad ported. So they were wedge ports, but then he hand finished them. And then brothers did all the machine work and put the Pro Stock motorcycle valve springs on it and had Weisco's in it and all this stuff. And that's the car that I did some of that 165 racing with AJ.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys remember any of that, but we did that 165 class. Me and him started that. We did that for a few years. It's too much work racing that kind of competitive stuff with a car with aprons. It's a lot of work because you got to pull the every time you service the motor, you got to pull the apron out, the carburetors off, and yeah, it's a nightmare, and exhaust and all that stuff. So that kind of gave up with that deal. Had kids, and then the racing's a lot harder to do, a lot harder to find time. But the last one I did was they did the drag weekend. I always wanted to do that hot rod drag week, right. But I couldn't take that much time. But they did a drag weekend in 16 or 17, and then it was like a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday deal. So it started in Tucson, and then we took everything to Tucson, and then went from Tucson to Phoenix, which was Firebird or whatever they call it now.
Yeah. And
then from Phoenix back to Auto Club Speedway, Fontana. It's gone now, but so we drove the cars, all those things, and back from Phoenix to Fontucky. That's whatever that's 300 or 350 miles.
Yeah.
With a high compression car and a full close ratio and all that stuff. So
now. And you did that in which car? The 67?
That was a 67 sunroof.
Was that your dad's car?
It was my dad's car, and then kind of went down through the family, and that thing was fast. It ran 1260s on the motor, and then there were 1280s on the motor, and then it ran 1180s on nitrous. And you could drive it at 70 miles an hour. So I'm telling you, that car did that whole thing, and I did that whole deal, and I didn't even put plugs in it. That thing, and Bruce did he followed us, Bruce Amerta did followed us on the, in a rental car, and he put it all in the Hobby W's.
Yeah.
And then at that time, I got the fastest 4-cylinder award at that deal. Can't bracket race with them, but
right.
But I did get the fastest 4-cylinder.
Nice.
So yeah, I was super proud of that. That was a big one for me. And
to do it in your dad's car too, right?
Yes. Yep. So
now,
yeah, that was big.
So if we can do some tranny talk, let's talk a little bit about transaxles, right? So transaxles are like the anomaly of Volkswagens because they're the specialty thing. There's like your main places you get transaxles from, right? Your most popular shops, and there are a lot of people that build transaxles. But when I remember I interviewed Greg Aronson, who was the A in Fat Performance, and he when he worked for Gene Berg, that's what he did, was build transaxles. And I said, so he trained you on building transaxles? He said, no, he handed me the book and said, here, rebuild that. So
right.
When you're going through the process, what's an overall general process of like a transaxle rebuild? Like with what, if you were to explain it to a person to the degree that you go through on a transaxle?
Yeah. Yeah, I never thought about it like that. So let's say an IRS comes in, core tranny, and let's say the gentleman says, I want to make it a Pro Street freeway flyer, which Pro Street's kind of the industry-wide term. Some people say Super Street, some people say, whatever.
Right.
Super race, whatever. So street race, yada, yada. But that basically means welded gears, steel forks, hardened keys, 4-spider super diff, and your aluminum heavy-duty cover, right?
And now, of those parts you just listed, how many of those are factory parts?
So your steel forks are factory ones. That's at a different year units. The welding, we do that in-house. The diff and covers aftermarket. And a heavy-duty cross shaft, that'd be aftermarket too.
And the spider gear, the 4-spider gear diff is late model diff?
4-spider gear diff, aftermarket differential, super diff. So it's a whole aftermarket carrier.
Okay, so it's completely aftermarket.
Which in the Jeep world or V world is no big deal. That's aftermarket carrier, no big deal. So that's kind of standard stuff. So I get it, drain the oil, take it apart. Everything gets cleaned and then inspected. And then even certain things you don't even have to inspect, it just gets thrown right away. So your IRS one will always have a brass fork, it gets scrapped. It doesn't matter if it's broke or not. Most of the time they're always broke. So things like that, the early model stuff, if it's early model swing axle, it'll have thin thrust gears, that all gets scrapped. It'll have sliders without back cuts, that all gets scrapped. Some people recut them. I don't do that because, in my opinion, it cuts through the factory heat treat. Nobody reheat treats them when they're doing this, when they're cutting them. So, yes, it works fine for a couple thousand miles, but it just wears right in there. It's just too soft, in my opinion. Some people run them, yada, yada. I don't run those.
Right.
And then, so the biggest thing is, and everything gets fully inspected, and everything gets blasted inside too. That's a big thing. Some people don't do that. It's a lot more work. It's a lot more time consuming, but that's the only way you can really look at stuff and see if it's nasty or not. Sometimes it looks fine, and then you blast it, and you're like, and you don't see a crack or extra piece of wear, something like that.
So you'll glass beat everything?
Yep, everything gets sandblasted, the case inside and out, all the gears, shift rods, everything. And then the gear carrier where the first, second, and the third, fourth shift rails go through, the third, fourth gets all wobbly. Some guys only do that hole. I do the 2 holes, the first, second, and the third, fourth, and I do that in-house. I got my own fixture, got all the stuff to do it, so I can control that. New seals, new hardware, new synchros, quality deal brand synchros. Some guys don't put 4th gear synchros in. They only put first, second, and third, and put a used 4th one on. New main shaft bearing. That you got to do that nowadays. When I started, some people were putting used ones in. They were checking them, putting used ones back in. You can't do that. And then the big thing is the pinion bearing and differential bearings get brand new. Some guys don't change the pinion bearings. They'll look through and just find good ones and reuse good ones.
Yeah.
That's a gamble. That's a gamble. What can I say on that deal? I like to put new ones in, and then you don't have to worry about it.
And then, so we talked a little bit, and one of my friends here in town, John with RC Trans, he stopped building transaxles probably, I want to say I got one of the last ones he built about 2 years ago. He just stopped building transaxles, got rid of all the stuff. And the reason he left the industry is it's too hard to get good quality parts. Everything's on back order, and it's super aggravating. And he was doing something else. He started machining guns. He's got a company called M13 where he rebuilds fully automatic weapons and stuff. And he's like, it was easier for him to go into that and less stress because, especially here in Vegas and probably where you're at, right? You got all these big sand duners that bring in these Mendy boxes and all these pieces, and they can't get them rebuilt because the parts are on back order and all that stuff. Are you still having? Is there still trouble to get parts?
So in this business, it's always been not as bad as during the Rona times, but it's always been, well, not going to have those for 6 months again. Oh, you should have bought them. Oh, you should have bought 100 of them when you could. It's always like that.
Yeah.
So it's just standard. Everyone's used to it. Oh, like right now, there's no 457 ring and pinions to build Freeway Flyer 002s. Great. Do you think they tell anyone? No. They're like, that's the last one. Don't sell another one. Great. Luckily, they'll tell you that. Sometimes you'll sell them and then you can't get the parts. So during the Rona, when stuff was going crazy, it was definitely, you had to double check everything and make sure it was available before you could take the gentleman's money, right? Even on a special order gearbox, even high-end stuff. Man, a guy brought in a S4, and I sat on that thing, a Mendiola S4 sequential box. I sat on that thing a year before. I forget, I was waiting on a case or something.
Now,
maybe ring of paint. I don't even remember.
Now, in some of those Mendiolas, is most everything in there like custom made just for Mendiola?
Pretty much, yeah. On all that S4 stuff, yes. On the 2D, the pointier ones, let's say, those have Volkswagen forks and Volkswagen shift rails and a couple other little things, but all the gear stack's all aftermarket. It's all little stuff. So, and if they don't have it, you ain't getting it.
Yeah.
But a lot of that has fixed itself now. A lot of the people that were going out like crazy because you couldn't see a concert, that they're going back to seeing concerts, so the buggies are kind of sitting. So that's all kind of equalized.
Now,
but
so when we're talking about building transaxles, there's a lot of, my brother just changed his bus from swing axle to IRS because he hates the axle tubes and the seals that leak and all that kind of stuff. With building, and as part of that problem, because there's such a limited supply of new stuff that so many people are reusing old stuff, and there's not a source, it's too small of a market for people to make it, or do they make every replaceable part for these transaxles? It's just a what side of the rush you're caught on?
Yeah, that's a couple different ways to think on that deal. Some people, it's just like motors, right? You can build a whole 0-mile motor, but now you have a whole brand new Chinese motor.
Right.
So is it better to have the good German part that's got 500,000 miles on it, or the new China part that would never, ever see that many miles before just disintegrating into dust? So that's a tough one. Possibly on the axles and tubes thing, a real big thing we see is people not catching bent tubes. Real big thing we see is using the wrong cap for the wrong end casting. For a lot of leaks and lets the bearings move. A real big thing is too low. Drop plates don't fix being too low. If the thing is lower than it's got 4 big guys in it, it's too low. So, and nobody wants to hear that because they look cool that way, but it's true. Now, like the German folks guys, all those cars are all cambered out and they look bitching that way. Those guys don't drive those cars. They go show to show, right? If it's something that you're trying to run that damn thing and put thousands of miles on it a year, they're not going to do it that low. And I don't care who you talk to. I've done it. I've broken it. I've got burned on them. I know you can't run them that low. I'm going to put oil holes in the diff. No, that doesn't help. It's over traveled. Well, it's got drop plates.
Now, the lowering part of it, is it because the swing axle, the axle tubes are pointed back into the transaxle so fluid doesn't get out to the bearings?
Well, that fries the bearings, but the biggest thing is it's just nuking fulcrums because it's not, it's just like a drive shaft. I'm sure we've all had lifted pickups.
Yep.
You get that thing too lifted and it don't work no more. You know what I mean? It's the same thing.
Yeah. So you're saying cars that are too low, instead of the axle, the end of the axle being in the neutral position, it's in the up position of the wheel because it's in the up travel position, so it's putting an excessive wear on the fulcrum plate.
Yes, because that fulcrum plate's not like it's not a universal joint. It's just metal on metal with those two half moon fulcrums, right? So if that thing's too low, it's not running on the center of that fulcrum. It's running on the edge of it, and that's fine. But now once it wears that little bit of quarter inch of oil out of there on that tippy that it's running on,
right,
then it's just dead. Then it gets hot and boom, smokes it, and then that's all the end of it. Every guy with a lowered car's got the same story.
And so, in your opinion, if you're building a car like that you want slammed, IRS is the way to go.
Correct. Yep. And then, the airbags work for a while, but then a lot of guys don't get all the leaks fixed, and they drive the thing for an hour, and by the time they get there, it's all cambered out because it's leaked out, right. And then it's fried it too. So It's all stuff to think about it. I'm trying not, I'm not going to sit here and be old guy like you kids in your lowered cars. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just telling you, as the guy who's selling it, if somebody comes in and goes, I'm going to lower this car, okay, I'm not going to put the tubes on it. You guys can do that in your garage, and when it blows all up, you can yell at yourself.
Right. So let's talk about like transaxles. Which are the best transaxles for what purpose, in your opinion, from your experience and in your opinion? So if you're going to build a transaxle for a street car and you want, let's say you got a car you want to do a weekend racer type thing, right? You got to, like your 67, you want to drive the car, but you got a turbo motor and it's pushing 200 horsepower. What kind of transaxle are you building for that car for reliability?
So we do our turbo box, and then that'll be 388 ring and pinion, Pro Street spec with the Super Diff, welded gears, steel forks, hardened keys, and then we do the Super Beetle first gear upgrade. So that's the Super Beetle stack and first, modified for the early style course 2, third, and fourth to go in it. So then you get the best of early and late, and the 9-tooth stronger Super Beetle first gear. That, and if it's a swing axle car, a good set of racing axles. If it's an IRS car, some bus CVs and thing stubs. And as long as the car is not wheel hopping and it's leaving 2 black patches, you got a traction bar, red or yellow bushings in the spring plates and good shocks and the Kafer bar, that's a pretty good street setup. That'll drive all around and take a fair amount of abuse. If it's something that gets slicks, that's a whole different world, and then that's a full Weddle first, second, third, and fourth, and billet side plates, and a gusseted case, and all the stuff. It's a different world when you put slicks on them.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't think that, right? They'll go to the track for the weekend, throw some slicks on the car just because it makes it more of a quote-unquote drag car and they can hook up. But it's a whole different shock load to the transaxle because you don't get that slip from the tires.
That's right. Yep. It just hooks right up. And a lot of guys put too big a tire on them. You don't need anything. When Bubbitts ran 850s, I think he did it on a 928, a 9-inch wide slick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that car would half track in third gear on the wheelie bars. You know what I mean? So you don't need a bunch of tires. So these guys, when they put beach buggy guys do it a lot, is they put 10-inch tires, 11-inch slicks on these cars. And it looks cool, but it doesn't function. It's too big a tire.
Right. Now, so you've got the recipe for a trans. What's your take on a 5-speed, like a Berg 5-speed?
So my joke on the 5-speed, when everyone asked me at the show, when I was at Kelly Park, everybody asked me, do you do 5-speeds? Do you do 5-speeds? Sure. And then I say, it's a Berg 5-speed. That's who makes the Berg kit. It's expensive. Oh, how expensive? And I say, you can build a turbo 4-speed transaxle and the turbo engine cheaper than you can get the 5-speed with all the stuff in it. And if you do a turbo engine and a turbo trans, you can have a fast car that still does 70 or 80 on the freeway. So,
yeah, well, I mean, the early Porsches, obviously the early Porsche 911s turbos had 4 speeds, and then they upgraded in the 89, the G50 car, to a 5-speed turbo box. So the gear ratios, I guess the shifting is the difference, and for people to really get to have a close ratio low end trans and be able to have a stock fourth for a fifth. But
well, that's the thing. That's why Gene invented that, because of Gary's blue car, because it had the 48 motor in it, and he was trying to drive it around, and they couldn't gear it tall enough, and it would still launch in first gear. If you got 48s in a big cam, it won't pull a 388 and a 378. It'll dead bog, or it'll come out, or it'll knock the flywheel off, or it'll break the ring and pin in if it bogs. So the only way to get it to come out of the hole with a stock first gear ratio is to put a 437 or a 412 in it. And now the thing with a close third and fourth, it's not going to go but 50 or 55, you know. So that's why Gene invented that thing. I'm sure you guys have all seen the first ones where it's all welded together.
Right.
But it's got a Super Beetle first, second, a 148, 104, whatever Gene put in there, and then an 89 fourth, so the guy could still drive it around. So it was 1, 2, 3, 4, close ratio ish, and then it still had a stock force, so it would do 65, and that was the whole thing. So when we think 5-speed, we think of like a new car that would have a evenly split 5-speed, or something that would be geared to go 130 or 150 miles an hour, right, in some new car.
Right.
But that's not what that, I mean, you can do that, but that's not really what that thing was for. It was for the 48 motors that had a, let's say, a 2,000 RPM operating window to keep it in the pipe, basically.
Yeah. So if you're going to build a drag box, and it's going to be for like a real street car or something like that, let's just say like a real street class or something where it's really mostly going to be drag raced, right? Or even just like a car you just want to go have fun with at the track. Are you doing a type 1 or type 2 box?
All my stuff I've always done swing axles in. Even when we did, and that's probably back from when we did all the drag racing with my dad, it was all swing axle stuff. You know, the chassis car that Ron Loomis built him, you know, it had 5-inch short axles and a type 1 box, and that's just what we ran. And, you know, to be honest, I don't recall it ever breaking. I mean, I've blown up a bunch of stuff, but, you know, I always call that I'm trying stuff. So when people call me and they go, I want to do this, I want to do that, I go, okay, well, it didn't work for me, you know. Or, you know, you can do that, and it works for about this long, you know, stuff like that. So
now, there have been a lot of 5-speed kits over the years. Well, there's 3 that I think I know of. I think there was a guy named Mickey's or Mikey's Super 5. There was the Berg 5-speed. And then there was one other 5-speed. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head right now. But in all the years of doing transaxles that you have you seen a bunch of those come across to you or no?
No, not really. They go in the car and they stay in there. They're most of them. Very rarely do the people run those cars hard that have those things in them.
Really?
Yeah.
So, have you done any Porsche transaxles?
No, I don't mess with any Porsche stuff. Volkswagen only.
Yeah. So in the breadth of transaxles that you do, so you'll do type 1 gearboxes, you do type 2 gearboxes also?
Yep, type 2s, Mendiolas, reduction boxes, all that stuff.
For those that don't know, the type 2 gearbox is like the later model, is a later model bus. Like, what was it? 68 and later they went with the bus box, separate.
Yep, Yep, so it's, that'll be your 3 ribs, and then it goes the pyramid. Some people call those 5 ribs with the pyramid shape on top, and then it goes 6 rib 091. You know, like they run in dune buggies and stuff like that, and then it turns into water cooled water boxers. There was a couple later model 80 to 83 was nose cone side shift 091. So there was some funky stuff when it got into the Vanagon stuff.
Mm-hmm. And now you've got also an eBay store on your website that shows you've got plenty of trannies for sale on eBay. So do you keep a fair amount of transaxles in stock ready to ship to people?
Yeah, we're always moving stuff. Yep.
And absolutely. Then what's the most popular box? Now, well, back up 1 second. Do you rebuild stock boxes like split case trans and all that kind of stuff?
Yep, we do those, but those things are so expensive now that they really don't have any place but a totally restored car.
And to rebuild a split case trans, are the parts you can only use like NOS parts and stuff like that if you can find them?
Exactly. And then the rest of the stuff is just piles and piles of cores looking for good parts.
Really? So in your opinion, what's the best factory built transaxle that's out there? What's the best one if you're going to pick one transaxle and say this one's got the best gear ratios and best, as far as stock box setup?
So this is a good one because there's a lot of internet myths out there about the factory freeway flyer, which everybody thinks the late model Super Beetle, since it has the 388 in it, is the factory freeway flyer. So everyone's looking for those and to swap in their IRS cars. What they don't realize is the factory 388 Super Beetle box, instead of the .89 fourth gear, the 388 trannies had a .93 fourth gear that knocks it back down low again. So all they're doing by doing it a stock single side cover, Super Beetle trans, is making a taller 1, 2, 3 and then about the same fourth as the earlier model ones that had 412 by 89. And that's from 68 to 71, let's say. We're all the way into IRSers were 412 by 89.
So is the 412 by 89 an overall higher gear ratio than the 388.93, or are they the same ratio?
I'd have to get on the calculator, but it's pretty doggone close when you're driving it in fourth gear.
And so because they went with a taller ring and pinion, they did a shorter fourth gear, so you'd have that same engine speed, because their focus was engine speed to push that cooling fan.
Exactly. Yep.
So when people say, I've got a stock freeway flyer, there's no such thing, because the freeway flyer is really an aftermarket transaxle gear ratio setup.
Right. So only some very, very, very late model Carmen Gias had a factory 388 by 89. And I've been doing this a long time, and I may be seeing, maybe 3 or 4 of them. So very, very rare. It might not even be American trannies. They might have been European stuff, Yeah. Hard to say, but.
And how would you know that? Let's say you got a room full of cores. How would you know that looking at that trans? Is there a specific number on that trans?
You have to take it apart. That's the only way, especially nowadays that everything has been so mixed and matched. There's very rarely any original stuff anymore.
Now, what do you see? So one of my friends growing up in the VW industry, he's been out of the world for a little bit, but Jim Barbeau is a buddy of mine. He used to own a place here in Vegas called Desert Racing Performance, and he actually taught Bill Shapley how to build transaxles. He came to work for him, and Shapley's a guy in Vegas that does trannies. But working, hanging out with Jim for a while and all that stuff, he would talk about, everybody blows out fourth gear synchro because they rest their hand on the shifter, and it kind of puts a little bit of pressure on that synchro. What's the most common problem that you see with transaxles that are brought to you?
So bus guys do that a lot because there's nowhere to put your arm. So, and it's not the synchro. The synchro doesn't hold it in gear. All the synchro, think of it as a clutch. All it does is stop it as you're shifting it so it doesn't grind. So the trannies, they go like early swing axles when you go first to second fast.
Right.
That's the synchro, not stopping the gear properly. So a lot of times that's another one of those myths where, it's popping the gear, needs a new synchro. That's not what's doing that. But what it is when you're holding your hand on the shifter, the fork that goes in the operating sleeve that's connected to the gear, now it's not riding on a cushion of oil. Now you're just jamming it in there, and it's just going metal on metal, and it's just chewing itself up. And it'll take 1,000 or so miles to do that, but it will nuke it. So yeah, don't do that. And then as for what's always usually wasted on the IRSers, it's always the broke first second fork. A lot of them pop out of fourth gear just from wear, not so much as holding your hand on it, but that's just where they spend most of their time. So that's just what takes the beating on it. It just wears out the slider, the operating sleeve, and then it wears out the synchro cone, which is the piece that's pressed onto the gear itself. And that's, in Porsche world, they call it engagement teeth, so it's just all different words for the same stuff, but
now,
that's usually what dies the most.
Yeah. is there a particular type of gear oil that you prefer to use? Is there a gear oil that's better than other gear oils out there? Because obviously, they'll have that thing with engines, right? Like, oh, they don't have zinc in the new oils and all this kind of stuff. What is, in your opinion, is there a specific oil to use for gearboxes?
So I'm a proponent of maybe a little bit less expensive and change it more than put $1 million stuff in there until it blows up. Mm-hmm. So the best stuff that I run in off-road cars, race cars, anything, even Vanagons that the guys that have Subaru conversions that really run hard is Swepco 210. That stuff works really good. It's $100 a gallon. Any street car, swing axle, IRS, play streetcar cruisers, going to the show, going on the freeway, running around. Valvoline works fine. Put 80-90 in it. And the biggest thing is to change that stuff, probably every 4,000 or 5,000 miles, believe it or not.
Really?
The stuff they make now is not as good as what they used to make. The original dinosaur oil is not the nasty black stuff that you take out of those cores when you get them out of a field. The new stuff is just not the same. It doesn't last as long. So the tranny doesn't have a filter. All it catches the metal on is the magnet. It works metal on metal. That's how the thing works. So your only thing you can do is to dump that crap out and keep changing it. That's all you can do to stay on top of it.
Now, has there ever been any guys doing any kind of gear coatings or any of that kind of stuff like they do with some of the thermal coatings they do for engines?
Yep, you can do all that stuff.
Do you do any of that?
I don't do any of it. I don't. So like if you cryo a ring and pinion, maybe it goes half of another pass. You know what I mean? Is that worth the expense and the nightmare of doing it all? The biggest thing is, especially for race cars, once everything's set up right, it lives. When it's not set up right, it's always blowing stuff up, or it's a bad driver or whatever. Once it's working, it's going to stay working. So, as in chassis setup, they do make some cool coatings that you can put on the gears that, like same stuff you put on a frying pan. What's that stuff?
Like
Teflon like that. But, yeah, but that's kind of more. That's really over the Volkswagen kind of world. Like it's not really necessary. What Weddle does is rem coat everything, where the gears go through this tumbler and it comes out looking chrome, but it's almost polished, all the gears.
Yeah.
That's their big selling point, that the rem polished stuff runs quieter. All the new gears you get from them now are all factory rem polished. So that would almost be a travesty to take that bitchin' $1,000 gear and then go have somebody spray all that crap on it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So probably not necessary nowadays.
Now, you talked earlier about on the swing axles, like the end caps on the bearing cover on the swing axle doesn't match the end casting of the axle tube. How can you tell if you've got the right one or not?
So there's another thing that always happens too with disc brakes. The disc brake kit for the caliper bracket is too thick, and then that lets the bearing move in and out a little bit too. And then that lets the axle on the inside of the tranny wobble around and do weird stuff too.
Oh, really? So like dropping fulcrum plates, stuff like that, you'll see from that type of stuff?
If it's real bad, it'll drop fulcrums. If it's just a little bit, it'll kill fulcrums because it lets the axle move in a funky arc in there, even if everything else is set up right.
Really?
So years ago, they're all like that. Now they're probably maybe 50 thou off. They used to be probably 150 thou off, and we'd have to make spacers or cut special caps. And the way you can tell is you put the bearing in there, press the bearing in, and then it's really easy. All you have to do is where the cap sits on there, that step you measure with your mic, and then you measure the cap. If it's not within 20 or 30 thousandths, the squish of the gasket, then it's the wrong one. So
if
that's
people
pretty much it.
If they've got chronic axle seal leaks, it's going to be that the bearing cap's not squishing the O-ring correctly.
Yep. Or it's not squishing the O-ring, or it's letting it walk
much
around in there.
Yeah.
That's usually what it is. It won't seal. So it's usually when it's the shallow in casting, and then somebody puts a shallow cap on it, and then it doesn't matter how much glue you put in there, it won't seal.
And so when you term out axles on a transaxle, you check all that with a mic.
Yeah, and my biggest thing is, which I have a real big stickler for, is when they're on the same tranny and they're different side to side. Oh my God, I hate that so much. I'll fix it every time when they come that way, because the poor customer doesn't know. He's gonna work on it someday and mix that up, and even if it's out of warranty, if it's 10 years from now, he's gonna have a disaster with it. You know what I mean?
So what you're saying is, with those bearing cap covers, they're just as different as the end castings that they made, because they have short end castings, long end castings. So there's as much variety in the caps that there are in the end castings.
Yeah, but it's nothing to be scared about. There's 3 different end castings: 67 long, 68 long, and then all short axle. So 67, 67 and 66 short, and the 67 mid-year long that takes a long axle short spline. Those take the same caps. The 68, well, 68s are kind of funky because they're both in that year, it seems to be, or at least that's where they've all mixed up by now when we're finally getting them.
Mm-hmm.
Those ones can be one or the other, but like I said, all the shorts are all the same. Shorts are easy. When you get into the longs, that's where it gets messy. So usually every long axle tranny, I've been doing it for years. Whenever they come out of here, I give them the caps with it. It's just easier. Then the guy doesn't have to figure it out. He takes his other ones and throws them on the shelf, yada, yada. Put the nice clean blasted and painted ones on there, put new seals in it, and send it down the road.
Yeah. So now, without the end cap on the bearing, there's always a high probability of losing that fulcrum plate.
Right. So that's why when they go out without caps, a lot of guys will strap them or put a washer on it to hold the bearing in.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to be aware of that. When you put it in the car, leave all that on. And then when you put the backing plate on, just be real gentle not to bump anything. Don't let your buddy in there try to spin the wheel on the other side, stuff like that. Just be real gentle and make sure that bearing doesn't slide out.
Yeah.
Stuff happens a lot of times. If it slides out a little bit and you push it right back in, you can sometimes feel it go home and you're good. It's just, if anybody ever has a problem, you can measure that too. If the bearing's stuck out and it doesn't match the cap, then it dropped the fulcrum inside.
Right. And then what are some of the, like, if you could talk so, hey guys, to take care of your trans, do this. Is there anything that you see people like, man, you had an avoidable issue and you just let it go too long and it just went bad? Like, what do you see as the big, is it mostly just worn out stuff, or do you see a lot of stuff because of neglect?
Yeah. Neglect, because the Vanagon guys will do it the worst. Well, it started making a noise about a year ago.
Right.
What, dude? Really? Well, yeah. And then, I was crossing Wyoming and took a shit. Yeah, I bet it did, bud. And then when he sends it in, hey man, this thing's wasted. It needs a ring of pinions, everything. What? It started making noise, buddy. The first week you should have started thinking about what we're going to do about it now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So stuff like that. Volkswagen guys have always been kind of cheap on that stuff. We'll build a 2-liter and we'll pull it right on our used tranny. No
Right.
big deal. But we'll blow that thing right up. But, very rarely do people do the gearbox before the engine, you know what I mean? Where
right.
if you can do it all together, it makes a better package. Anyway, stuff like that. Too low, that's a killer. Not changing oil, that's a killer. Stuff like that. If it's a tranny that hasn't modified for a freeway flyer, running it hard with your buddies, that's killing everything. That's frying the motor, that's frying the gearbox, that's frying everything. So, whole bunch of that stuff.
Yeah. And as far as like new diffs, stuff like that, Most of that stuff still available. I mean, obviously, the majority of everything comes from Weddle.
Yeah, Weddle's a part supplier, so everything that's still available they have. Some of that stuff is not. Some pieces you have to make. Some pieces you have to get from different year cores, things like that. There is some issue with some replacement parts, repop parts being not good quality. A good example of that is the .82 fourth gears.
Right.
So Weddle makes a .82 racing gear. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a wonderful gear, but it is a racing gear and it makes noise. It makes noise because it's a racing cut gear. There's other gears out there that maybe are copies of the factory gear-ish, and they're supposed to be a light-duty gear, stock replacement, super cheap, and a lot of guys are building freeway flyers with the 412 and then using this cheap .82 overseas fourth gear, and I have had nothing but trouble with those damn things. I don't use them. I haven't used them in years. So the way I like to do my freeway flyers is with a German or Italian-made 388 and then a factory German .89 fourth gear. The math is about the same when you're running down the road in high gear.
Yeah.
It makes a better product all the way around. That's the best way you can chase noise. Those other 82s got the woo-woo-woo, and when you complain, they tell you to drive it, and it doesn't work. They don't go away. Once it woo-woo-woos, it woo-woo-woos forever. So anyway, just that's some stuff out there, and there's huge price differences on that. It costs way more money to put those new 388s and stuff, and it does that super cheap $150 fourth gear. So that's all stuff people need to be aware of.
And now, with all the trannies that are out there, with the so you do Mendiolas as well, which is a full aftermarket trans.
Yep.
Do you think those are worth it to, like, that's, if you're doing drag racing, that's the best trans to do, is a Mendy?
Yeah, in my opinion. Some classes, like Pro Turbo, they don't let you do that, or they didn't for a lot of years anyway. So some of those guys have to run the bus boxes with, like, the full swing axle kit. My car I'm building now is a Gia-Pan car, and it's got an IRS Mendiola in it with all IRS stuff and 930s. Mm-hmm. That's the way I'm doing it now. I feel like that's going to be the hot ticket on not having to work on anything, and not having to service stuff all the time. You can make swing axle stuff live, but every race you got to service it, and it's just a lot of work. It's a lot of. So, you burn yourself out fast nowadays.
So you're going to be? Did you say you're going to be racing a car that's going to be IRS?
IRS, yep. And then I have abandoned all my Volkswagen engines. I've given up on that, and I run Ecotec 4-cylinders now.
No way.
So, yeah. So this car is going to get a pretty mean Ecotec, fuel injected E85 turbo deal.
Yeah.
So, yep. So I'm doing that on this one, and hopefully have that done this summer here. And I really want to do the drag and drive stuff. I'm super into that, so I want to do that with it.
You think you'll do that with the Ecotec in it?
Yeah, Ecotec. Yep.
Nice. Well, I mean, there's a lot of technology. I mean, that's kind of the thing, right? With Volkswagens, there's a limit to where you can have your cake and eat it too, because of the limited technology that's in the engines. I mean, even as far as we've come today, where 200 horsepower out of a flat 4-cylinder air-cooled engine with no Nikasil plated pistons and with no any of that stuff, and being able to, and usually it's going to be turbo EFI, you're still taking archaic technology and pushing it to the limit. So, I mean, it's understandable to do some things like that. Some people think it's sacrilegious, whatever. My attitude with the Volkswagen is it's everybody's blank canvas to do what they want with it. And there's enough of them out there that everybody can do something extremely different.
And that's right. And, I love to go to the sand dunes and off-roading a lot, and had all these, man, I think I had 5 or 6 fully dressed turbo Volkswagen motors at one time in all these different cars I owned. And the guy working for me, it was the same guy from that other shop, Dan. He worked for me for years and years, and he blowed up his Volkswagen. It broke the head. It blew the head out where the valve went. It didn't drop a seed. It didn't break a valve. It broke the casting of a brand new head we had on it. And he's like, I'm done with this, man. I'm done with buying the expensive fuel, all this. And he did. He bought a car for $500 and pulled the engine out and put it in his dune buggy, and he ran that thing. And I've just, I started doing that, and I just kind of got out of all the air-cooled engine stuff since then.
Right.
And been running these water pumpers, but I know everybody says it's sacrilege and all that, but I put one in a 67 bug, and with a swing axle, and it made 450 to the wheels.
Really?
And I had 2 seats in the front, and I had 2 little baby seats in the back, and I know everybody says it. Everybody goes, I had a bug that popped wheelies. Oh, that's cool. Did you have one that did it in second and third gear? When you shifted into third, would it do wheelies? Because this car would. Street car with DOT street slicks. It was a lot of fun. That was an animal. That was a good car.
And this was a street car with an Ecotec in it?
Street car, yep.
And the Ecotec fits under the deck lid?
No, it hangs out the back all stupid.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you got to put one of those drag the drag spoilers on the back with the like the box on the back of that.
Yep, I had a Ron Loomis wing on it, and I had it all cut out on top and put the intercooler in there. It's kind of neat. It was different.
And where'd you mount the
radiator? It was funny because radiator went in the package tray right in the back there, and it was weird because it would run hot, and then I put these like NASCAR ducts I got from eBay with some 4-inch crapper pipe to it that went from the quarter windows with Lexan quarter windows to the package tray, and fixed it. No problem.
Nice.
It was fun.
Well, yeah.
But I tell you what, it was about deadly dangerous thing at the racetrack.
Yeah, I can imagine. What's so much weight on the back? I mean, what's that motorway? What's the Ecotec motorway?
It weighs about another 100 pounds over a dressed turbo Volkswagen.
Yeah. And you're doing, and these are aspirated Ecotecs, or they're turboed?
We did it both ways. That one has turbo in it, and then the E85 deal. So.
Well, I think that's pretty cool.
And then that car.
Anything you think we didn't cover that you'd want to touch on?
Well, I know you were asking about the free re-gears.
Yeah, so tell me about that's a pretty big offer to put out there, right? As long as you own the transaxle, you'll re-gear the transaxle. How'd you come up with that idea? So when I first started, before people got to know me, I would say I recommend doing this, and they go, "Ooh, I don't know. This other guy says this, and this guy says that, and I just got off the phone over here, and they say this." Okay, well this works well for me, and my other customers. I think this will work great for you. I don't know. So instead of talking someone into it, I go, "Hey man, it comes with free re-gears for life. If you don't like it, you think I steered you the wrong way, bring it back. You got to pay for whatever part it needs, or whatever part you messed up if your shifter didn't work or whatever, or yada yada. But if you want to change fourth gear, you want to change the ring pinion, buy the ring pinion. The labor's free." So that's kind of the trick on that, and then. We kind of just ran with it over the years. And how many trannies have you re-geared off your suggestion? You really want to know? Yeah. Yeah. You really want to know how many people have taken that up? Yeah. 0.0. So when you've given people a gear suggestion, you said, "Hey, I think you should do this," or "I think you should do that," they've turned out to be. And I'm not saying that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying. They don't send it back for this reason. They don't send it back for that reason. I had a guy call a couple weeks ago, and he goes, "Hey, I bought a tranny in 2018, and I want to re-gear it with the free re-gears." Okay, no problem, but you're going to need synchros and bearings and, seals. But it's free. No, the labor's free, but you drove it for, it's got 6 years on it, bud. It's got 6 seasons. Right. It's going to need some stuff. Just okay. I'll change the one part, but
if there's something wrong in there or worn out, what are you gonna do, man? You know. So anyway, so
now
that's what's happened.
As far as the business, starting the tranny business, in hindsight, when you look back, you glad you did it?
Sure. Yep.
And is there no shortage of business? I mean, you've got more trannies than you know what to build.
Yeah, I mean, it's like everything. It ebbs and flows. It's busy and it's not busy. There's always steady work. The last couple of years have probably given people a false narrative of how busy this industry is, but it's never. Luckily I got to start on the busy. I saw it go to crap, and then I saw it get busy again. You know what I mean? So everybody else is buying Mercedes, and I'm stacking the sandbags. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, 100%. Well, man, Ben, I'm glad we got to chat, man, because I got to understand a little bit more about some of the stuff and what you do most importantly. And I've seen you at the show. Do you race any of your stuff, or are you still, do you have any Volkswagens, like street cars, stuff like that you're putting out there, or where are people going to see you if they're going to see you?
Yeah, I got a van again that I cruise to the shows. It works really nice. Pack everything in there, and then I've got this Gia drag car going to finish this year. Hopefully, we'll get that on YouTube a lot. And I've been dune buggying a whole bunch. I had kids, and they're old enough now that we're buggying with them, and so we're doing that a lot. So now it's starting to get back into racing. It's always been it's always been I got to do it, right? Like it's in my it's just buried in me from my dad, right? So I'd really like to beat that 807, with a door car. We'll see. That's a tall order. I don't care who you are, but I'm hoping to at least run 8s with a 4-speed. A lot of people need vertigates and stuff, and I think I can wheel that thing. So that's my goal. I'm going to drag and drive it. I'm going to go to the sick week Route 66 deal this summer.
The 666, huh? They're calling it 66.
Yep, I'm all scheduled for that. That same guy, Dan, is my best friend. He was my best man. I was his best man. He got diagnosed with cancer. So young guy too, not even 40, and so he's interested in doing maybe some bucket list stuff. So that's one of them. So it's a good excuse to finish this damn car. It's just piles and piles of parts and collecting stuff for so long. Now it needs to finally get finished up. You know what I mean?
And what car are you taking on the 666?
So it's a 67 Gia. It's a pan car.
Yeah. And
it's got all Ron Loomis stuff on it. It's 3-inch raised, 3-inch narrowed with his really cool IRS arms. Got micro stubs. It's got Ron's narrowed beam on it. It's got a crappy one-piece front end just because I couldn't find a car with a clean nose that was good enough to cut up for a race car, cheap enough.
And what are you putting for drivetrain in it? Is it going to be Ecotec in that?
Yeah, it's got the Mendiola 4-speed. It's got synchros in it. It's got an ATB, which is the limited slip differential, and Berg shifter. Nothing fancy. No, I'm not going to put Ron made me a Rev 6 for Ecotec, but I'm not going to put any of the slipper stuff on it, not to start anyway. And
what are you hoping to run in that car?
Like I said, I'd like to run 890s at least, but I in a perfect world, if I'm just throwing darts and throwing crap at the fan, a 790 would sure be amazing.
Yeah.
But we'll see. It's a tall order.
Well, that's rad, man. I wish you the best of luck, brother.
And that's 100% street car too. That's a registered car. It ain't legal for nothing, but it is a street car.
I dig it, man. So if people want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, just give the shop a call, shoot me an email. You can go to the
Your
You
website.
can go to BENCO Racing website. You can go to the BENCO Racing YouTube, check all that out of all the Papa Wheelies, and I have all the 165 stuff on there from a million years ago.
Oh, do you?
And
yeah, so
yep.
there's some people that may not know about the 165 class. There was a class, and you said you and AJ are the ones that kind of put it together?
Yeah, we were just shooting the crap one day, and we're trying to think of, there's nothing more miserable than bracket racing, brake light racing. It just sucks because there's always some guy that's really good at it, and he never has a fast car. It's just dead consistent. So there's no incentive ever to make something faster or anything. So we're trying to figure out how we could find a way to do heads-up racing where everybody could race with whatever car. So you show up with a chassis car, cool. You show up with a street car, cool. You show up with a turbo car, you want to put nitrous on it, whatever. And our thought was to run it on a stock size tire, which is the 165. So you had to run at the time it was Nankang, I think. Mm-hmm. Was what the brand. Yeah, a 165 radial, and run what you brung. It had to have an open diff, and I think it was some other stupid rule. Oh, it had to have, you couldn't put it on the wide wheels. It had to be on like a 5-inch wide wheel or 6-inch wide wheel or something. And that was it. So real loose, no weights. You're not weighing anything. There was no tech guy rules or anything. I think one time we jacked up a car to see if it had a spool in it, and that was it. And that was fun, man, because then you could have those 48 cars, turbo cars, and
what kind of times? What was the best time they were running on those 165 classes?
So my 67, oh, it's funny, the turbo rusty car, the 66 rusty car with the turbo 2387 in it, and the 4-barrel, that one ran a 770 something at the first race and fried the clutch in it. Because
and that's an 8th
before
mile.
that, 8th mile, yeah. And I took out it had a stage 3 and a 6-puck, and I took that out when I switched the tires. I'm like, I don't need that much clutch for these little tires. And I put a stage 1 and I think a stock disc or a rounded Dankin disc in it or something. And I was having a great time because it would do 4th gear burnouts in the water box. So I was doing these 4th gear, just monster John Force burnouts with it, and it didn't make it through the race. So at the final, I made it through the semifinals, and it was slipping, and then I tried dumping water on it and everything. It was just nuked. And then the final, it just slipped and wouldn't even go. But anyway, that car ran 770, and then I brought that 67 bug out with the 48s and the squeeze, and that one ran 777 at 93 or something. And then Dan, he built it was a late car. What was it? It was a 70 or something, or 71, and we converted it to swing axle because that worked the best out there, and with a turbo motor with a 2-barrel on it, mm-hmm. and he got that thing to run 750, 752, something like that. And that was on and there's no traction control. You just slip the clutch out the hole and granny shifted, and it was fun. They actually hooked up pretty good, but it was a lot of work racing that.
Yeah.
Even at the 3 races a year at Irwindale, because we're busy, so you don't work on nothing until a week before, and then, oh, God, and you're going through everything and fixing all the stuff you broke last time, and, oh, man, nightmare.
Yeah. No, I get it, man. I get it. Well, that's cool, man. I'm glad we got a chance to get you on the podcast and get your story, and I appreciate what you're doing, and maybe one of these days I'll drag a transaxle down to you and have you do it for me. For sure.
Yeah, no problem.
We'll talk about that. And then people want to check you out, go to BENCO Racing is the website?
I think it's BENCO Trans-axels.com. I don't know. I think I own all of them. I don't remember anymore.
Yeah.
Or just give me a call.
Yeah, no problem. So it's BENCO Transaxels.com. And then are you on Instagram as well?
No. I don't have a desire to do any of that stuff anymore.
Yeah.
So I had all that stuff, and I haven't put anything on the Facebook since 2020.
Yeah.
So I'm over it.
Well, definitely appreciate you coming on the podcast, man. And if you ever got anything new and stuff coming up, man, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll get you on for sure.
All right, cool. Yeah, maybe. Hey, man, maybe if the world all works together, I can maybe me and Dan can come on here after we do that whole adventure and tell you our whole story.
Absolutely.
Coming up.
And by all means, man, just because you got an Echo Tech and it doesn't mean you can't bring it to our event we do here in Vegas, One Crazy Weekend, which is a big strip cruise, car show, and a poker run where I give away a few $1,000s in cash. So it's one of the events that instead of coming here and setting up a booth, you come here and be part of the event. And it's more of a driving event, having fun, cruising around in Vegas in your Volkswagen. So that's October 3rd through the 5th this year. So that would be rad if you wanted to come out and check that out, man. That would be cool.
All right, sounds good.
If you like that podcast, and I'm sure you did, don't forget to subscribe today. Share this podcast with your other VW friends. We love when you grow the podcast. And now let's get some shout outs. Shout out to Todd Mayer, sent me an email and said he's been listening and enjoying the show very much. Very good to hear many threads related to high quality product in our hobby. For the East Ohio, there's a fairly sizable VW scene. Two notable shows are Jim's Custom VW in July and Dubs in Geneva Labor Day weekend. He's been in the VW scene since 1987, currently has a 65 notch and a few Beetles. He's got a side hustle to support the basic habit maintenance, some other air ride stuff too. So he says, keep up the great podcast. So appreciate that. Ben Hartman dropped me a line and he listened to the CB Performance podcast. He said, hey man, I just saw these things on here and thought you might be interested in these. So Bren Hartman sent me an email with a link to some fully billet Type 4 heads, which I love to see that. Appreciate that, brother. Thanks. Also, Jeff Pierce wanted me to let you guys know about the Port City Volkswagen Show 2024. That's going to be happening at Rogers Point Park in Catoosa, Oklahoma. Make sure you guys check that out. If you're out in that area, man, go check out the Port City Volkswagen Show Friday, May 31st at 1 p.m. So go check that out. It's over there, Port City. It's going to be taking place over there in Rogers Point Park, Catoosa, Oklahoma. So go check that out. That's going to be happening May 31st. Also, again, Todd Mayer picked up an old school Sans shirt and a hat. Appreciate you for supporting the podcast. Just want to say I appreciate you guys. Make sure you go register for One Crazy Weekend. If you're looking for something to watch, go check out George's YouTube channel. Search The Wagon on YouTube to find him. Also, leave a link down in the description below. Go subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't yet. Appreciate all you guys for your support and your listening. And until next week, later.
You probably don't know that there's a new Volkswagen out that doesn't look like a Volkswagen.